What's going on? Patrick O'Morris, I'm back. I guess we're talking about, I had the surgery. Last time we got together, we were talking about the diagnosis and the surgery was going to be happening. Surgery has happened. Still have bandage on a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back. Surgery happened.
How do you feel?
I actually feel pretty good. A lot better now. It's been a couple of weeks and it was quite brutal. Going into it, I thought it was going to be painful, but it was a lot more painful than I thought it was going to be. But I'm grateful that I get the bandage off in a couple of days and it's been healing up pretty nicely.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
What was it like being there?
You mean like having the surgery?
Having the surgery. What was it like having the surgery?
Being in the operating room and making some jokes with the doctors and the nurses in the operating room before they put me to sleep was okay. And then waking up and that was a bit scary at first because waking up and I had a lot of gas because they had to intubate me, and so I had a lot of pressure in my stomach and my throat was hurting and my nose was stuffy and I wanted to stand up, but they were trying to tell me not to stand up, that wasn't a good idea. I still had a lot of the medication in me at that point in time. And the first thing they did was offer me a popsicle, which I thought was hilarious. When they offered me that, I was thinking, is this to put on the outside of my throat? But being in recovery was very isolating because at that point I didn't have any of my family or my friends around me. It was just me and a couple doctors and some nurses. And in the recovery room, there were a few other people that they brought in who had a much harder experience waking up than I did. Some of them were they didn't have a clue where they were. They didn't know what was going on with them. And they were freaking out. There was a child, maybe about 8, 9 years old, who was pretty autistic, who woke up and had like 3 nurses around him, touching him, and he was not having it. And it was a humbling experience waking up and seeing the other people around me struggling the way that they did. I was struggling, but it was a bit difficult seeing the other people, what they were going through.
What was it like for you after the surgery and you were back in your room, the process of them dealing with you?
After the surgery, when I went back to my room, or went to my room when they finally got me a room to be in, they came in and they were asking me questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, what does the pain feel like? And to me that was hilarious because it's a very subjective question. And so I said the pain was a lot, and they said that they would get me some medication for that. Being around, seeing my family around me, that was very comforting. That was very emotional. The last video I talked about conversations I've had with my children around what I wanted my end checkout of this world to look like. And so being there and seeing my family around me, wanting to be there, wanting to support me, that was something that I greatly appreciated. I shared the room with somebody who, an elderly gentleman who needed a lot of support. And that was hard for me to see how he was treated from time to time, depending on the support staff, the nurse that were working at particular times. They weren't always compassionate. They weren't always nice. And I felt for him because he's in a vulnerable situation. He wasn't, or still is maybe, in a vulnerable situation that he couldn't do for himself, and he needed help. And those who were assigned to help him they weren't always helpful. I was grateful that one of my sons stayed with me the entire night, even though they tried to kick him out. He stayed with me to make sure that I was okay. I felt bad at times because he was bent up in 2 chairs. But having the support of my family around me made all the difference. I think if I was in a situation that I had to rely on the care of the overnight people who were looking after the other gentleman, I don't know how I would have felt, because seeing that was not very good. Asking for pain medication wasn't necessarily something that was taken very seriously. I'm generally a pretty calm person. Even if I'm in a lot of pain, I'm very calm about it. I will articulate, verbalize what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking.
Did they get you on any drugs?
No, they didn't get me on any drugs. But I did get some pain medication, and it took a little bit of convincing somewhat, because I wasn't yelling and screaming or freaking out or anything like that. I think because I was calm and I was saying what I was saying, they didn't really take me all that seriously. So it took a little bit of convincing for them to stop and say, oh, wait a second, this guy might be in pain based on what he's saying.
All right. Now that you had a couple of videos out talking about the surgery and what it was like after the fact with your fiance and stuff like that, for anyone that might be going into surgery or going through a process of the healthcare system, what are some basic suggestions that you can give them?
Advocate for yourself. Have conversations with the people who are supporting you, and so that they can advocate on your behalf if you're not able to. The system, there's a lot of amazing people who work in healthcare, and there's also a lot of people in healthcare who might be struggling with their own challenges. And so the level of support may not always be there. But if you are able to advocate for yourself, and if you're able to have people around you that are going to advocate on your behalf, then your experience might be a little bit better. We often forget that the people that support you in that moment in time, they're human beings too, and they may not be having a great day, or they may have reports that they need to do, or various different things. But you have to stand your ground sometimes and really push back and advocate for yourself. And if you need that help, that support, I say, don't be shy about it. You don't have to be an ass about it, but you can be forceful and really advocate for yourself properly. That's the number one thing that I would suggest for people to do. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion. If in your body something doesn't feel right, don't take a brush off. If you have to go to a second hospital, if you have to see a different doctor, whatever you need to do, it's your body. You know what's going on inside of you, and the professionals sometimes, they may not necessarily, they're not inside you. They're not inside your head. They're not inside your body, so they don't know what's going on with you. So I say, for sure, advocate for yourself.
Now, not everyone has the luxury to go to healthcare, and not everyone has the luxury of having people around them to help advocate and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that you have the answer, but what are some ways that I guess some of those people might be able to pull some resources or something that can help them go through with this?
There are a lot of support groups that are out there. There's, you name it, whether it's cancer or, I don't know, diabetes or alcoholism. Like, there's a lot of support groups that are out there. Whatever it is that are struggling with, I would say find a support group. And then when you're able to do that, you realize that, you're not alone in what you're going through. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles with people is that they struggle with what they're struggling with all alone, and they think they're alone. But this human condition that we all go through, there's a lot of similarities that we all experience. And, like I said, there's for cancer, there's lots of support groups that are out there. And if it means that if you don't have people in your circle that you can lean on who might have an understanding of what you're going through or might be able to support you, I'd say seek out some of those support groups. Whether it's on Facebook or talk to your doctor, there's lots of different ways that you can look it up.
Now, when you first got told it was cancer, what was your first reaction?
Oh, my first reaction was, this is real. Was wow. And it's interesting, I was thinking about that today, actually. When I first found out, and I was like, it was real, but it wasn't real. It was like, this is real. This is happening. Okay, what's the plan? What's the plan of action? How we're going to deal with this? How we're going to address this? All right, we got a plan, marching forward. All right, surgery, date, this is happening. Check all the boxes. But somehow, I think today was the first day that it actually really hit me. I was standing in my kitchen looking out the window, and since the surgery, my body has been changing. And like how my body feels, I've lost some weight and I haven't been doing any exercise because I've been resting. Like I can feel my hormones shifting, like I can feel my body changing. And so I'm standing in my kitchen looking to my backyard out the window, and I was like, that was real. And I think that it hit me that way because before, the changes in my body was somewhat subtle, but today it was like I'm feeling and seeing the evidence being manifested before my eyes because this thing was removed from my body. And what my body's doing, it's like my body's getting back to a level of normalcy. And how I feel today versus how I felt a month ago, there's a big difference that is tangible for me. And so when I stood there looking out the window, all I could think of is, wow, this was real. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't, make believe. It wasn't, possibly, sort of, kind of. This was real because I could feel the difference. And that blew my mind. Like, that really blew my mind.
How do you feel seeing that kids were there, fiance there.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any moment that you looked at one of us and was thoughts, any thoughts came to mind?
Um, I made a video with Kat and talked a little bit about this and alluded to it a little bit earlier as we were talking. Being in the hospital, coming off of the medication or the anesthetic, being less groggy, my throat is on fire, my head is hurting, I've got gas, I know I probably look like crap. And laying there in the bed and seeing the closest people to me, that was an overwhelming experience for me. It was an overwhelming emotional experience for me. My daughter was unable to be here, and she's out of the province, and she's struggling with her own health issues at the moment. And I know that she would have done anything to have been able to be in the room with the rest of my family. And so being in that moment in time and seeing them and seeing that not only the fact that they're just there, but seeing the fact that they wanted to be there, that was massive for me. At one point I had to fighting back the tears. It's just the medication, I'm sure. Fighting back the tears, I had to tell them how much of a big deal this was for me to have them there, and not just have them there, but have them wanting to be there, having them wanting to make sure that I was okay, having them supporting me, having my oldest son sleep on 2 chairs beside the bed, and if it was 2 a.m. and I had to get up to go and pee, the moment I stirred, he was wide awake saying, okay, what do you need? And he was there helping me through that process. To me, that's something that is not measurable. That's something that I'm extremely, extremely grateful for. And our ability as a family to create the type of relationship with one another that we're able to be there for one another, support one another. For us, today it might seem effortless. And it's funny because, when my children are around and some of their friends are around, and we get into conversations and we talk about a lot of things, and they look at us and they're like, you guys are weird, man. And we're like, yeah, we own it. Like, the nature of the relationships that we've curated with one another is such that there's clarity and transparency, and it's not just honest, it's transparent. And I know I don't know everything that goes on in my children's lives, and I know my children don't know everything that goes on in my life, but the nature of the relationship that we have and the immense amount of respect and trust we have in one another, to me, is worth more than gold. And so being able to sit there and feel that energy directed towards me, knowing that we did this, we created this relationship. Kat and I have been having a whole lot of conversations about relationships, and people look at our relationship and they're like, you know what, we want a relationship like that. And then, I know a lot of other people look at the relationship I have with my children, they're like, I want a relationship like that with my kids. And I'm grateful that we're all able to be somewhat of a light that people can look at and say, you know what, we can have good relationships with one another in the midst of the storm, in the midst of whatever's going on. We're still able to hold each other down. And so for me, that was this, out of this whole experience for me, if nothing else, out of that whole experience for me, this was, it was something that I had always known, but I liken it to what I just expressed about standing in the kitchen today and looking out the window and feeling the shift in my body and be like, oh wow, this was real. That moment in the hospital, laying in the bed and seeing the people around me and seeing our relationships, all of that sort of stuff. It was the same sort of, damn, this is real. We did that. We created that. We were able to, irregardless as to whatever, create that type of relationship. And to me, that's a beautiful thing. That's what life is really kind of about, is about those connections.
I know you have a lot of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have a lot of people that look up to you or look out for you. But I've noticed, me being one of your sons, I've noticed that not a lot of families have a similar transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Was this something that you wanted to make sure you had that full transparency from even before having kids? Or was that something that you learned?
I think I can answer the question. So my ability to be able to have the transparency that I have with my children, creating that type of relationship with them, came from me looking at my life and asking myself, when I was growing up, what was it that I needed that I never got, that I never had? Yeah, so looking at my life from the perspective of what was it that I wanted and what was it that I needed when I was growing up. As far back, when I came to Canada when I was 8 years old, and when I looked at the people, the adults in the room around me, I realized that that's not the life that I wanted. And so for me, at that point in time, it became extremely important for me that if the day ever came that I had children, that I was going to do my best to provide for them all the things that I didn't have when I was growing up, emotionally, mentally, physically, however I can. And along with that, help them to understand that I'm not perfect. I'm going to miss things. And the moment that when I miss something, it's their job not to be mad at me because I missed something, but it's their job to take note of that and say, when I have children, I need to push the envelope a little further. I need to be able to provide to my children what my dad missed, because my dad was going to do his best given the tools that were to his disposal. And for me, a big part of that was bringing my children along my journey, allowing myself to be vulnerable with them, within reason, but allowing myself to be vulnerable with them, allowing them to see me struggle at times and see how I overcame those struggles, so that they can understand that they can do anything they want to do. Tough times will come, but you have to step up in those tough times and push back. And so, in my mind, from 8 years old, it was, I know what I needed, I know what I didn't get, and when I have children, I'm going to make sure I give them what I know I needed and help them to understand that they need to do better than me. They needed to do better, a better job than me. And the moment that I would see them do something that was better than me, I would always praise them. Because for me, if they could, take a step that I wasn't able to take to make their life better, make people's lives around them better, then, I've done my job. I've talked a lot about my experience with this, from the diagnosis to the surgery, and you know, what I've experienced, and talked a lot about my family, talked a lot about my children, and how much they mean to me and how much I know that I mean to them, and how they've demonstrated that, and the type of relationship that we've been able to create with one another, which in today's society seems to be very unique. You know, as we have these conversations, you know, you can let us know, because the next time I can bring the kids in, and we could all sit down, we can all have the conversation. We could talk about, they could talk about their experience, because my experience within the creation of the relationships that I've created with them and helped them to define who they are within the realm of their own personalities and their own character, to be the best human beings that they could possibly be. You know, there's my view on how I helped them to discover that, but there's also their view on how they were able to navigate that. Because I haven't always been easy on them, sometimes not, you know. But my desire for them to be the best that they can be, I know that they understand that. And so, you know, if you guys who are watching this right now, if you have an interest in figuring out or hearing a little bit more about our story, then by all means, let us know. Put some notes in the comments, and we'll give you guys an update. My name is Patrick O'Morris, and we'll see you on the next one.